Hey guys, tonight we're trudging into the smoky, candlelit halls and mud-slick taverns of medieval Europe to answer one question. What drugs did people actually take in medieval times? Not the modern kind that you can just get from your local dealer down the road. No, these are the strange, sketchy, sometimes hallucinogenic collection of plants, powders, and potions that kept medieval people stumbling along. So before you settle in, take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you actually enjoy what I do here. Leave a comment telling me where you are listening from and what time it is for you. Now, dim the lights, switch on a fan for that white noise, and get as comfortable as possible. But let's pause for a second. Did people really get high on ergot, or did they just hallucinate because their bread was rotting? What counted as medicine when your barber was also your surgeon and occasionally your executioner? Did monks brew beer so strong it made them see saints, or was that just an excuse to play with the nuns? Was sage smoked for stress, or was it basically medieval aromatherapy gone wrong? And did peasants really eat poppy seeds until they forgot their own names? Congratulations, you've just woken up in the year 1349, and you're about to spend the night in a world where cannabis is medicine, poppy seeds are dinner, and the local monastery is basically a pharmacy run by sleep-deprived monks. Good luck. You rub the sleep from your eyes and find a monk grinding something green with a mortar and pestle. He swears it's for your back pain, but you're starting to suspect medieval medicine is just whatever they found growing behind the privy. Welcome to the world of cannabis, which is about to be prescribed for everything from gout to melancholia, also known as being sad because your dinner ran away. Let's set the scene. It's dawn in 1357, the straw mattress is poking you in places you didn't know you had, and your lower back feels like you slept in a barrel because you did. Into this agony shuffles Brother Raymond, the monastery's resident healer, and, not coincidentally, also the only monk who can never quite recall where he left his sandals. He claims he's up on all the latest medical advancements. By latest, he means advice from Galen, who's been dead for over 1,000 years, and one particularly helpful vision involving a talking goat. He opens a dusty wooden box, reveals a bundle of dried hemp leaves, and gives you a look that says, "Trust me. I've only accidentally set fire to my own beard twice." In the medieval world, cannabis is a cure-all. Back pain, cannabis poultice, cramps, hemp tea, insomnia. A quick pipe before evening prayers and you'll be sleeping through matins and possibly your own excommunication. The good news is, nobody's calling it a drug, at least, not yet. Cannabis is just another tool in the medieval first aid kit, sandwiched somewhere between leeches, prayers, and aggressively optimistic bloodletting. The same plant that's woven into rope and pressed into seed cakes is also being added to balms, ointments, and soothing pastes that are green, sticky, and always suspiciously low on actual instructions. Let's talk about dosage. There isn't one. Medieval medicine is less science and more close your eyes and hope for the best. Brother Raymond measures everything by a good handful, which is the medical equivalent of free pouring a cocktail with your eyes closed. Some recipes call for steeping cannabis in hot wine, others for mashing it into goose fat and slathering it directly on your sore bits. The only constant is the resulting sensation that you might either heal completely or discover you can hear colours. Side effects? Well, nobody's keeping records. If you're lucky, your pain eases, your mood lifts, and you're briefly the most popular person at evening vespers because you're handing out cookies made with herbal supplements. If you're unlucky, you become the subject of a new saint's tale, the miracle of the man who thought he was a duck. But in a world where the average painkiller is just ale and a brisk slap to the face, cannabis is, frankly, a miracle. The peasants use it for aching joints after a day of wrestling geese and losing. Nobles rub hemp oil into their temples to soothe headaches caused by wearing 3 pounds of hat. Even the local priest has a secret recipe for contemplation, which he absolutely does not share with the bishop unless the bishop brings snacks. The best part? Nobody judges you for taking your medicine. The church hasn't banned it, the king hasn't taxed it, and the local constable is too busy confiscating stronger stuff, like fermented turnip juice. Cannabis is so normal, you could practically roll it up in your Sunday bread, and no one would blink. In fact, they'd probably ask for the recipe. As evening falls, you realize your back does feel a little better, or at least you've stopped caring. The monk offers you a mug of warm hemp tea and a gentle reminder to keep your feet off the altar. You sip, sigh, and drift off, grateful for medieval medicine's one true miracle, a night without pain, stress, or memories of the day your dinner ran away with the neighbor's goat. Congratulations, you've just survived another day, and, thanks to cannabis, you might actually be looking forward to tomorrow, even if you still wake up in a barrel. There's a strange smell coming from the apothecary's tent, and it's not just last week's bandages. The poppy plant is in season, and that means opium, the medieval answer to pain, insomnia, and occasionally, I can't feel my legs. Spoiler, the cure is probably why. Let's start with the basics. It's a typical day in 1372, and you've managed to stub your toe on a loose cobblestone, sprain your wrist wrestling a particularly mean sheep, and get a mysterious medieval rash that the barber surgeon insists is probably fine. Pain is just part of life. So, naturally, you stagger into the local apothecary's tent, which smells like a cross between mouldy plums and regret. The tent is draped in drying herbs, and the proprietor is wearing what you sincerely hope is a medicinal robe, not just his pajamas. He offers you a seat on a bale of straw that crackles ominously and begins rummaging through dozens of unlabeled jars. There's no such thing as child-proof containers here, unless you count Don't Lick the Strange Purple Goo. Eventually, he finds what he's looking for, a lump of sticky brown paste made from the sap of poppy pods and wrapped in what might be yesterday's bread. Opium is, without exaggeration, the Tylenol, NyQuil, and triple espresso of medieval medicine. Got a toothache? Rub it on your gums. Trouble sleeping? Eat a dollop with honey. Chronic existential dread caused by the realization that you live in the 14th century? Opium to the rescue. If you're noble, it's mixed into expensive spiced wine. If you're a peasant, it's dissolved in weak ale and called Tuesday night. The thing is, nobody quite knows how much is too much. The apothecary's dosing method involves a lot of eyeballing and a dash of let's see what happens. There are no warning labels, no handy color-coded charts, just a vague family recipe, scrawled in Latin, advising you to use enough to quiet the demons, but not so much you meet them. Sometimes you take too little and you're still howling by morning. Sometimes you take too much and you spend the next 2 days having vivid conversations with a coat rack. And it's not just for pain. Opium is a miracle cure, according to the monks who sell it on the side, between prayers and competitive cheese-making. It's given to fussy babies, cranky elders, and anybody who so much as sneezes near the Lord's stew pot. There are poppy-based syrups for coughs, poultices for wounds, and even little poppy seed cakes for festive occasions. Honestly, it's a wonder anyone remembers their own birthday. Side effects? Oh, there are side effects. After a dose of medieval opium, you might find yourself staring dreamily at the wall for hours, inventing new types of clouds, or forgetting how to use your feet. Your friends and family take it in stride, because frankly, everybody's a little loopy. He's having a poppy nap, they say, as you drool onto your tunic, blissfully unaware that the chickens have stolen your shoe. Of course, withdrawal isn't discussed much, because if you run out, you just go back to being in pain, which, in the Middle Ages, is the default setting. Nobles sometimes end up with secret poppy habits, hiding jars in the bottom of their jewelry chests and blaming the servants if they run dry. For peasants, the main problem is affording enough to actually get addicted in the first place. Still, in a world without anesthesia, antibiotics, or even basic hygiene, opium is as close to a miracle as you're going to get. Whether you're nursing a battlefield wound, soothing a toothache, or just trying to nap through the next sermon, you're grateful for the humble poppy. The only question is, will you wake up before someone tries to steal your lunch? By sundown, the tent is full of contented groans, gentle snoring, and at least one person insisting they can hear angels. You shuffle out, legs a little wobbly, head full of soft cotton, and realize medieval pain relief is simple. You're either cured, unconscious, or about to star in next week's morality play. Don't trust the guy with the sticky brown paste. Hemp. It's not just for making rope or awkwardly sturdy shirts. In the Middle Ages, the seeds ended up in porridge, the stalks became shoes, and the leaves? Well, let's just say nobody's quite sure if Grandma's soup was supposed to taste that interesting. Let's set the scene. It's market day in 1311, and you're wandering through the village square with the vague hope of trading one of your surplus turnips for literally anything that isn't another turnip. You pass stalls selling everything from dubious cheese to candles shaped like saints. But the real action is around the hemp merchant's cart, where an enterprising peasant is hawking miracle fibers with the enthusiasm of a medieval QVC host. Need rope? Hemp. Need a sack for carrying questionable vegetables? Hemp. Need to reinforce your leaky roof? Patch your only pair of trousers? Or, let's be honest, make a pair of underpants that double as a medieval cheese grater? Hemp again. But it's not just the practical uses that make hemp a medieval superstar. Somewhere along the way, someone realized that hemp seeds are actually edible, if you don't mind the texture of gravel and the flavor of disappointment. They're tossed into porridge, ground into meal, or sprinkled over bread like medieval poppy seeds, only with less chance of seeing dancing angels and more chance of getting stuck in your teeth until Michaelmas. As for the stalks, they're strong enough to weave into just about anything. Ropes, sandals, fishing nets, and, if you're really desperate, a makeshift helmet for the next village snowball fight. It's basically the duct tape of the Middle Ages, if duct tape was itchy, plant-based, and considered a valid form of currency when the barley harvest fails. Then there are the leaves. Officially, they're just another bit of green you toss into whatever stew happens to be bubbling on the fire. Unofficially, well, every family has a story about the one time Uncle Edric added a little too much hemp to the evening pottage and spent the night attempting to negotiate a peace treaty between the house cat and the soup ladle. To this day, Grandma's special soup is spoken of in hushed, reverent tones. No one's sure what was in it, but everyone remembers feeling strangely at ease about the thatched roof leaking into the bread bin. Hemp is so embedded in daily life that people barely notice they're using it. You go to bed in a hemp-stuffed mattress, wake up to a hemp seed breakfast, and trudge through mud in hemp-woven shoes that promise support but mostly deliver dampness. You mend your fishing net with hemp twine and mutter under your breath every time it snags on another sunken boot. The only thing not improved by hemp is your hairstyle, which, after a day under a hemp hat, resembles a sheep that lost a bet. Of course, not all uses are strictly practical. Some monks swear by hemp tea as a remedy for everything from headaches to persistent thoughts about cheese. The recipe involves steeping the leaves in boiling water, adding a bit of honey, and pretending not to notice if the drink makes your chanting a little slower and your vespers a little more philosophical. Local healers prescribe hemp poultices for rashes, aches, or just to keep fussy children quiet during Mass. Apply liberally, they say, which is medieval for no idea if this works, but it hasn't killed anyone yet. Modern life might have turned hemp into a political debate, but in the Middle Ages, it's simply everywhere, doing everything, all the time. If you're a peasant, hemp is your best friend. If you're a noble, you prefer silk, unless it's laundry day, and then hemp will do just fine for the servants' towels. At the end of the day, as you climb into bed with your hemp-stuffed pillow, you realize life is a little rough, a little itchy, and possibly slightly more relaxed than you remember. Tomorrow's porridge will taste faintly of last year's harvest, and you'll swear Grandma's soup has gotten even more interesting. But as you drift off, one thing's certain. In the Middle Ages, hemp is everywhere. And whether you're wearing it, eating it, or accidentally getting mildly philosophical because of it, You wouldn't last a week without it. You reach for a drink, and the good news is, it's not water. The bad news is, your small beer has more floaties than a public swimming pool. Yes, everyone, including the children, drinks beer all day, every day. It's weak. But after 9 pints, weak is just a theory. Welcome to medieval hydration. A world where water is considered a daredevil's beverage, and beer is the safe option. If you're imagining foamy golden lagers served in a frosty glass, stop right there. Medieval beer is basically damp bread in liquid form, unfiltered, unpasteurized, and so chunky you could use it to grout a bathroom. It's served at every meal, every age, and every social occasion. The only question is whether the spoon you use to eat your soup will also stand up in your ale. Small beer is the everyday drink for medieval folks. It's called small not because it's cute, but because it's weak. Think beer with the alcohol content of a loaf of rye bread. You're drinking it not to party, but because the alternative is water fresh from a stream where the local sheep hold their annual synchronized swimming contest. Small beer is brewed by boiling questionable water with malt and hops, if you're lucky, then letting it ferment until the whole house smells like bread and feet. The result is a drink that's just alcoholic enough to kill some germs, but not enough to make you forget you have to shovel the manure pile at sunrise. Everyone drinks it, everyone. Children get small beer with breakfast. Farmers sip it while sharpening ploughs. Monks use it to wash down their gruel. There's even a mid-morning beer break, medieval Europe's answer to the office coffee pot, only with more floaties and less existential dread. The rich and the clergy get slightly better stuff, but it's still a far cry from the craft IPA your neighbour won't stop talking about. Let's talk about those floaties. Medieval brewing is more art than science, and the main ingredient is whatever was lying around. Unfiltered means there's a generous helping of grain husks, bits of straw, and the occasional dead bee. If you find a chunk that's suspiciously crunchy, just remember, extra fibre is good for you. The average peasant's immune system is less fortress and more Thunderdome, so a little added nutrition is the least of your worries. But the real peril isn't the floaties, it's the side effects. Small beer is supposed to be safe, but after the 3rd or 4th mug, you're feeling a little more relaxed than you'd planned. After 9 pints, weak starts to feel suspiciously like tipsy, and before you know it, you're singing folk songs with the local chickens and attempting to invent the medieval conga line. The morning after, you wake up on a haystack with a mouth like the bottom of a boot and a vague memory of challenging a goose to a staring contest. Of course, sometimes the beer isn't small at all. On feast days, or when the brewer's had a good year, things get stronger. That's when you really start to appreciate why medieval folks had so many saints. Someone had to pray for your liver. The stronger ale is reserved for celebrations, religious holidays, or, let's be honest, any Tuesday when the weather is slightly less miserable than usual. Even the brewing process is a community event. Entire families gather to stir, strain, and sample the product. Someone always insists their secret is adding more hops. Someone else claims it's all about the magical yeast living in the rafters. In reality, it's about survival. You drink beer because it's safer than water, more filling than soup, and frankly, it makes that daily medieval grind a little bit softer around the edges. So next time you sip your filtered, refrigerated lager, raise a glass to your ancestors, survivors of the chunky, floaty, suspiciously lively world of small beer. Because in medieval times, you drank to stay alive, and if you got a little tipsy along the way, well, so much the better. Cheers to making it through another day, one mug at a time. If you thought wine was reserved for nobles, think again. Monasteries are busy flavouring their homemade vintages with everything from honey to hallucinogenic herbs. Congratulations, you're drinking what might be the Middle Ages' first edible. Let's be clear. In the medieval world, wine is never just wine. It's not even always grape-based. Sometimes it's whatever was left in the cellar after last year's disastrous cider experiment. The nobility might have the clear, sweet stuff imported from Bordeaux, but for most people, wine is an experiment in liquid courage, dental hygiene, and, inexplicably, religious enlightenment. Take a stroll through the average medieval monastery. Rows of sun-dappled vines snake across the hillside, tended by monks who have spent their morning alternately praying and wrestling geese out of the grape barrels. But the real magic happens in the cellar, where Brother Bernard is busy improving the vintage with a handful of whatever's growing in the garden. Honey for sweetness, lavender for clarity of mind, wormwood for, well, whatever wormwood is supposed to do, apart from giving you hallucinations and the urge to write poetry about clouds. Every monastery has its secret recipe. Some monks insist on soaking rose petals in the barrel, others swear by poppy seeds, while a few claim that tossing in a pinch of wild mushrooms will open the door to holy wisdom. The line between sacred tradition and accidental psychotropic experiment is alarmingly thin. The result? A beverage that's part communion, part fever dream, and all medieval. But it's not just monks who get creative. Apothecaries and village-wise women have been infusing their own wines with everything from thyme to wild hemp, each concoction designed to solve a specific medieval problem. Got a headache? Here's a cup with willow bark and wine. Insomnia? Add a dash of henbane. Just don't plan on remembering the next 3 days. Bad mood? Elderflower, honey, and a little splash of whatever the cat dragged in will put a smile on your face, or, at minimum, on the neighbour's goat. And then there's the taste. Medieval wine islets call it robust. A glass might greet you with notes of plum, earth, and a suspicious aftertaste of medicinal root. Sometimes it sparkles, thanks to fermentation. Sometimes it fizzles, thanks to whatever Brother Bernard dropped in by accident. If you're lucky, the honey covers most of the flavours. If you're unlucky, you'll discover why the phrase acquired taste was probably invented by someone on their third cup. Of course, nothing says celebration quite like spiced wine. On feast days, the wine is mulled with cloves, cinnamon, nutmeg, spices worth more than your life savings, and, for good measure, a shot of whatever homegrown herbs survived the last frost. The entire village lines up for a taste, and by sundown, half the town is either dancing around the maypole or lying under it, contemplating the meaning of sheep. But beware, moderation is not a medieval virtue. After a few goblets, the line between holy visions and the wall is singing again gets alarmingly blurry. Monks have been known to pen entire treatises on the meaning of life after a particularly strong batch, only to wake up the next day and find they've written 40 pages on the importance of not trusting ducks. And if you think children were spared, think again. Water is a gamble, and small beer isn't always available, so it's not unheard of for kids to get a watered-down glass at dinner. It explains a lot about medieval bedtime stories, most of which end with someone turning into a carrot or being chased by a very angry loaf of bread. So, next time you sip your carefully curated Cabernet, remember, in medieval times, wine wasn't just a drink. It was a gamble, a medicine, a party trick, and occasionally the start of a long, confusing conversation with the family cat. Cheers to history's most adventurous winemakers. Drink oop if you dare. The village healer hands you a suspicious root and tells you to chew it for courage. Mandrake and henbane are the herbal equivalent of playing Russian roulette with your nervous system. Side effects may include visions, euphoria, or sudden belief that you're a goose. Let's set the scene. You're nursing a deep medieval anxiety. Maybe you're about to propose marriage to the baker's daughter, or you have to face down the local lord after accidentally inventing sourdough soup with last night's bread. Either way, you find yourself in the healer's smoky cottage, surrounded by bundles of drying herbs, a cat with one eye, and shelves stacked with bottles that rattle when you look at them wrong. The healer gives you a choice. Do you want courage, sleep, or to see the truth behind the moon? You're not sure what that last one means, but you're already here and the cat's staring. You take the root and chew. Mandrake and henbane have legendary reputations, half medicine, half myth, and all trouble. Mandrake roots, for example, look unsettlingly human. They come with folk legends and instructions that read like a prank. Harvest at midnight, pull the root from the ground, and try not to let it scream. If you think that's just local superstition, imagine yanking a root that shrieks so loudly, the whole village starts praying for rain, just in case it's a demon. Chewing mandrake is, at best, a gamble. In small doses, it might numb a toothache, help with sleep, or give you the liquid courage to ask your boss for a raise in turnips. In larger doses, however, you might spend the evening chatting with the fireplace, convinced it's the ghost of your great-aunt Mildred, or wake up 2 days later with a note pinned to your tunic that says, "Never again, the chickens." Henbane, meanwhile, is the original wild card. The leaves are sticky, the flowers yellow and devilishly cheerful, and the effects are unpredictable. 1 minute you're dozing peacefully, the next you're convinced you're a Viking on a raid, or that you've invented time travel using only a wooden spoon. Local doctors sometimes make henbane tea for nerves, but they'll never drink it themselves. A cup for thee, a prayer for me, as the saying goes. Hallucinogenic herbs are the medieval multi-tool for every occasion. Numb the pain of a broken arm? Mandrake wine? Need a vision for the next harvest? Henbane pipe. Got a rash that won't quit? Just rub a poultice on it and hope you don't hallucinate a second rash in the process. The church is suspicious, of course. Anything that makes you see visions is a short hop from heresy or demonic influence. Use too much, and you'll find yourself on the receiving end of an exorcism or, worse, a stern lecture from Father Bernard, who still hasn't forgiven you for sleeping through Easter Mass. Still, healers keep using these herbs, mostly because, despite the risks, nothing else in the cabinet works. It's the 14th century. What are you going to do? Wait for Tylenol? Sometimes, these potent herbs even show up at parties, small doses hidden in honey cakes, or sprinkled into the special wine. The after effects? Lively, unpredictable, and sometimes the highlight of the social calendar. There's nothing quite like an entire village suddenly convinced the maypole is a giant snake and staging an impromptu dance-off for survival. As the effects wear off, you find yourself back in the healer's cottage with only a mild headache and a vague memory of challenging a duck to a debate about medieval politics. Mandrake, henbane, and their friends are the ultimate gamble. You could end up pain-free, newly courageous, or spending the night as the world's first goose lawyer. In medieval times, that's just another Tuesday. Congratulations, you survived the hallucinogenic herb club. Don't worry, your secret's safe. The cat's seen much, much worse. Step inside a medieval apothecary shop, and you'll find shelves lined with dried plants, powders, and bottles with labels like unicorn horn and blessed thistle. Nobody's sure what's actually inside, but it all goes down easier if you mix it with wine. The moment you cross the threshold, you're hit by a smell that can only be described as botanical panic. The air is thick with the scent of rosemary, musty books, and a hint of something that might once have been a goat. The apothecary, a person who always looks a little like they're hiding something, because they are, welcomes you with a nod and immediately offers you a sample of something that stings your nose and might be glue, medicine, or both. Every surface in the shop is covered in mysterious jars and bundles. Some are filled with common ingredients: sage, mint, a handful of suspiciously shriveled berries. Others are labelled in Latin, a language the apothecary barely understands but uses anyway to impress customers and hide the fact that the dragon's tongue is actually just a particularly ugly carrot. There are roots bundled together with old string, dried mushrooms that look like props from a haunted puppet show, and dozens of powders in varying shades of danger. And the pills? There are no pills, just lumps of pressed powder, rolled in honey or stuck in cheese to trick children and grown men alike into swallowing them. Capsules? Not unless you count a snail shell filled with mystery goo. The customer service is enthusiastic but unscientific. The apothecary is equal parts pharmacist, bartender, and, occasionally, marriage counselor. You describe your symptoms, and they instantly launch into a series of recommendations that would terrify any modern physician. Coughing? Here's a syrup made from violets and the tiniest bit of opium. Achy joints? Rub this ointment of mystery on your knees and avoid strong winds. Trouble sleeping? Try a sleep draught with valerian, poppy, and just enough honey to disguise the taste of regret. But it's not just human customers who keep the business afloat. Villagers arrive with sick chickens, limping pigs, and cats with mysterious injuries. The apothecary reaches for the universal balm, a concoction that smells like onions and despair. Does it work? Sometimes. Maybe. There's always wine to wash it down if the results are disappointing. Of course, the most expensive items are the ones with the most outrageous names. Unicorn horn powder, definitely not parsnip. Dried basilisk scales, fish skin, and mermaid tears, plain salt water if you're lucky. The richer the customer, the wilder the claim. Nobles want to believe they're swallowing something rare and magical, so the apothecary keeps a special shelf just for them, carefully dusted and positioned at eye level for maximum effect. But let's be honest, most of the real business happens under the counter. For every headache, heartbreak, or unmentionable rash, there's a remedy tucked away in the back, sometimes illegal, sometimes just stronger than the church recommends. The apothecary knows which villagers want a quiet cure for insomnia, opium syrup, whose nerves are fraying before the festival, hemp tea, and which monks need inspiration for next Sunday's sermon, poppy wine. Discretion is part of the service. The only rule, don't mention it at confession, and definitely don't tell Father Bernard about the saint's blessing, a potion with enough herbs to inspire visions and possibly time travel. Still, the real secret of the apothecary's shop isn't what's on the shelves, but the attitude, a little hope, a little risk, and the unshakable belief that life is easier if you just add honey and wine to everything. As you leave, clutching a pouch of blessed thistle and a stern warning not to take more than a pinch, you realize you've survived another trip to the medieval pharmacy. Whether you're cured or just distracted by the taste, it's all part of the adventure. And if nothing else, you've got a great story and probably a slightly magical burp to share at the next feast. Need surgery? Don't worry, the barber surgeon is here, with his trusty soporific sponge, soaked in opium and hemlock. Just breathe deeply and try not to think about how much your odds depend on whether he skipped lunch. Let's set the scene. You've managed to injure yourself in classic medieval fashion. Maybe you got into a brawl with a goose, or perhaps you just tripped over the family pig again. Either way, you've got a broken limb, an infected boil, or a mysterious swelling that looks like it's about to develop its own personality. This is not a world of urgent care clinics and numbing injections. It's you, a wooden bench, and a man with more knives than teeth. The barber surgeon, so named because he'll trim your beard, lance your abscess, and remove your appendix all in the same sitting, is the medieval multitasker nobody asked for. He enters the room, rolling up his sleeves with theatrical flair. His tools are arrayed on a stained wooden table, a rusty saw, a pair of tongs, a hammer for bone encouragement, and the star of the show, the soporific sponge. The concept is simple and terrifying. Take a sponge, soak it in the strongest stuff you can find, opium for the pain, hemlock for the calm, a splash of vinegar to keep things fresh, and maybe some wild lettuce just for luck. When the time comes, you're instructed to inhale deeply. That's the theory anyway. In practice, it smells like a compost heap set on fire, but you're desperate enough to try anything. You ask, "Will it make me sleep?" The barber surgeon winks and says, "Let's find out." His confidence is either reassuring or a sign that you should update your will. Medieval anesthesia is never a guarantee. Sometimes the soporific sponge works like magic, and you drift off to a dreamless place where no one is asking you to hold still while they remove your toenail. Sometimes it doesn't, and you just get a little woozy and forget why you agreed to this in the first place. If you're truly unlucky, you get both, dozing off just long enough to be woken by the sound of your own leg being sawn. The effects are unpredictable. Depending on the herbal cocktail, the skill of your barber surgeon, and whether the local apothecary was sober when preparing the mix. Side effects range from mild drowsiness to visions of dancing chickens, and in rare cases, enthusiastic recitations of psalms in Latin, despite the fact that you only know 4 Latin words, all of which mean help. In the background, the local priest is probably praying for your soul and the neighbours are peeking in to see if you're about to provide the day's entertainment. Pain management is, at best, an experiment. The soporific sponge is just one part of the medieval pain relief toolkit, which also includes biting down on a leather strap, drinking yourself into oblivion, or holding hands with your most supportive goat. Once the procedure starts, time loses all meaning. You drift in and out of a fog, sometimes from the sponge, sometimes from the shock. The barber surgeon hums a little tune to steady his nerves, or yours, and at some point, you're pretty sure you compliment the sponge on its personality. When it's over, you wake up wrapped in linen, sweating, slightly confused, and grateful that you're still in one piece, mostly. Recovery involves rest, wine, and whatever herbal concoctions the village healer can whip up. If you're lucky, the pain fades, the wounds heal, and you have an impressive new scar to show off at the next feast. If you're unlucky, well, there's always the priest on speed dial for last rites. So next time you see a sponge, give it a nod of respect. In the Middle Ages, it wasn't just for cleaning, it was your best shot at not remembering the worst day of your life. And that's what passed for anesthesia, sort of. It's a feast night in the Lord's Hall. The food is suspiciously spicy, the drinks have extra kick, and someone just sprinkled something into the roast that makes everyone start giggling at the wall. No one admits what's in it, but everyone's relaxed. Let's set the scene. Tapestries hang on every wall, torches flicker, and the floor is covered in rushes fresh enough to almost mask the smell of last week's entertainment. The long tables groan under the weight of pies, game birds, sweetmeats, and bread that doubles as a conversation starter. Do you think this counts as food? Servants scurry back and forth, and the air is thick with anticipation, plus a suspicious hint of something herby drifting from the kitchen. Tonight's party is not your average bread and cheese with neighbours affair. This is a noble banquet, which means every dish is a flex. Spices imported from distant lands, honey drizzled over everything, and at least 3 courses dedicated to showing off how many peacocks your lord can stuff with smaller birds and call appetizer. And yet, the real show isn't the food or even the jugglers. No, it's the rise of the exotic powders. What are exotic powders, you ask? Well, nobody's entirely sure. Sometimes they're spices, genuine cinnamon, black pepper, or nutmeg worth more than a peasant's yearly wages. Other times they're something a little more recreational, imported from the Middle East or traded in the back alleys of coastal towns. These are powders and resins that promise to liven up any party and occasionally make the tapestry start singing Gregorian chants. The kitchen staff are in on the secret. A little sprinkle in the wine, a dash on the roast, a pinch in the candied figs, and suddenly the conversation gets much more interesting. The Lord's cousin begins reciting poetry to a potted plant. The head cook is convinced the bread can talk, and frankly, after 3 hours by the fire, it probably can. Someone starts a rumour that the jester's hat is full of bees, which sets off a spirited game of don't let the bees touch the cheese. And it's not just the kitchen. The apothecary, eager to keep his most lucrative customers happy, slips in with a pouch of something labelled Persian Delight, Venetian Sparkle, or, if he's really feeling dramatic, the Dust of Paradise. Nobody reads ingredient lists. Everyone just wants a story to tell at breakfast. As the night rolls on, inhibitions slide away faster than the Lord's favourite chalice. The musicians switch from polite airs to raucous folk tunes, the dancing turns from elegant to experimental, and at least 3 nobles are found giggling under the table, convinced the floor tiles are moving. At some point, a debate erupts over who can eat the spiciest pigeon, which ends when the steward, red-faced and teary-eyed, declares himself king of the fire tongues and demands a parade in the garden. But the most telling sign of a successful party? Nobody's talking politics. The old rivalries and land disputes are temporarily replaced by shared hallucinations of a dancing goose, and for one rare night, everyone in the hall is united by confusion, curiosity, and the burning need for more wine. Of course, come morning there will be regrets. The Lord will wonder why there are turnip carvings all over the main staircase. The steward will be found asleep in the dovecote, and the apothecary will quietly remind the kitchen to use half as much next time. No one will admit to anything. It's an unspoken rule. What happens at the feast stays in the feast, except for the goose, who will be telling this story for weeks. So next time you're invited to a noble party, keep an eye on the spice rack. Watch out for the jester's hat, and maybe pace yourself on the exotic powders. In the medieval world, dinner could be an adventure, and dessert, a full-blown vision quest. The returning Crusaders brought home more than just bad armor tan lines. They introduced Europe to hashish, a concentrated cousin of cannabis that's rumored to turn even the grumpiest knight into a philosopher, or at least someone who doesn't care about bathing. Picture it, the year is 1192, and you're standing in the village square watching Sir Geoffrey return from the Holy Land. His horse is somehow missing 3 shoes, his armor is rustier than your memory of childhood, and he has a 1,000-yard stare that suggests he's either seen the face of God or accidentally eaten the wrong stew at a roadside inn. Tied to his saddle, among broken swords and a suspiciously well-fed goat, is a bag of something sticky and fragrant, a souvenir from lands far, far away. Sir Geoffrey is quieter these days, and it's not just the PTSD from seeing the inside of a Saracen dungeon. His squire whispers that the master has discovered contemplation, which sounds noble until you spot him sitting by the duck pond, stroking his beard and pondering the meaning of pond scum. The secret? Hashish, pressed resin from the cannabis plant, carefully tucked into Crusader baggage alongside relics, dried figs, and a haunting inability to keep track of socks. Hashish isn't just a drug, it's a conversation starter. The first time Sir Geoffrey shares it, he's holding court in the Great Hall, spinning tales of distant lands, mysterious herbs, and nights spent under strange stars. The local priest tries to intervene, only to find Sir Geoffrey offering him a mysterious brown prayer aid. By the end of the night, the priest is preaching about the theological significance of ducks, and half the village is convinced that maybe, just maybe, God is shaped like a turnip. Soon, hashish becomes the original medieval import craze. Nobles, always eager for a taste of the exotic, invite Crusaders to dinner, where hashish-infused cakes are passed around alongside spiced wine and even spicier stories. Nobody quite knows how much to use, so every meal is an experiment. Sometimes it's a subtle lift. Everyone's cheerful, music sounds sweeter, and the Lord forgets to tax turnips for an entire afternoon. Sometimes it's chaos. By dessert, the steward is composing poetry to his shoe, and a knight challenges a tapestry to single combat. For the lower classes, hashish is more rumor than reality, a tale traded in taverns or a secret shared in dark corners. But the idea spreads. There's something out there that can make you feel lighter, softer, even a little bit magical, if only for an evening. The local wise woman is soon offering Crusaders honey balls at the market, promising relief from everything from toothache to spiritual heaviness, which is medieval for I've seen too many winters and not enough decent meals. There's also the practical side. Medieval life is hard. After a day of mucking stables, ploughing rocky fields, and dodging taxes, a little hashish goes a long way. The village carpenter swears it makes his back pain vanish. The blacksmith claims it inspires him to invent better horseshoes. He hasn't, but he feels better about it. Even the cook, always on the edge of a breakdown, sneaks a bit into the evening stew, just to see if it makes the children nap. Of course, there are side effects. Hashish is blamed for at least 3 impromptu midnight pilgrimages, 2 accidental marriages, and a trend in philosophical barnyard debates that nobody can quite explain. The local authorities try to crack down, but it's hard to police what you can't pronounce, and even harder when half your guards are napping behind the pigsty. In the end, hashish becomes just another part of the medieval landscape, a little taste of the wider world, wrapped in mystery, laughter, and a healthy dose of not caring about how long it's been since you last changed your tunic. Sir Geoffrey still sits by the pond, occasionally solving the meaning of life before forgetting it again. And as for you, you realize that sometimes surviving medieval Europe is easier when you can laugh at ducks, ignore the taxman, and see the world with slightly softer edges, even if it's just for the afternoon. You open your eyes to the medieval sun and instantly regret every decision from the night before. Your mouth tastes like a compost heap, your head is pounding, and someone swears you tried to invent time travel using only turnip wine. Congratulations. You're the latest victim of the original Hangover, medieval edition. There's straw stuck to your tunic, a duck staring at you with silent judgment, and a vague sense that you owe someone an apology, possibly a goat. Your memories of the feast are foggy, but the evidence is all around. Half a loaf of bread under your pillow, a mysterious stain shaped like the Holy Roman Empire, and the faint sound of someone snoring in the chimney. Let's be honest, hangovers in the Middle Ages are not for the faint of heart. Modern medicine might offer ibuprofen, greasy breakfasts, and the gentle reassurance of running water. But here, you have three options. Cold well water, herbal cures dreamed up by the village wise woman, and the eternal hope that you'll be reincarnated as a hedgehog so you never have to face daylight again. First comes the medieval headache, a special variety that feels like your skull is being used to grind wheat for next week's pottage. Sunlight is your mortal enemy. Someone opens the shutters, and the room instantly transforms into a medieval laser show. You groan and pull a wool blanket over your face, which does little to help because it smells like damp sheep and last winter's plague. Next is the thirst. Nothing says bad choices like a mouth dryer than the Lord's sense of humour. You crawl toward a wooden mug of small beer because, ironically, it's safer than water. The beer is lukewarm, tastes vaguely of hay and disappointment, and still contains the occasional floaty, but desperate times call for desperate measures. You drink deeply, mentally preparing yourself to face whatever comes next. Enter the village wise woman, who appears at your side with supernatural timing. She takes one look at you and nods sagely. "Ah, the morning after the feast. I've just the thing." You're handed a mug of her secret recipe, a bracing mix of nettles, wild honey, and a few drops of whatever's left at the bottom of her special herbs jar. You swallow, and instantly wonder if she's trying to cure you or just invent a new form of torture. Your vision blurs, but at least your headache takes a back seat to whatever's now happening in your stomach. Then comes the guilt. Not the modern kind where you sheepishly text apologies, but the medieval kind, public and communal. At least 3 neighbours stop by to remind you of your exploits. You challenged the blacksmith to a foot race, lost to the horse. You proposed marriage to a sack of barley. You sang the entire book of Psalms to the tune of "Row, row, row your boat." Each story is worse than the last, and the only thing you remember for certain is that the turnip wine tasted like hope and regret mixed together. You make your way outside for fresh air, which mostly smells like livestock and mud, and attempt to regain your dignity. The chickens avoid you, the dog rolls its eyes, and even the village priest offers you a sympathetic pat on the shoulder before quietly suggesting penance, just in case. There's no aspirin, no brunch, just a lingering sense that you survived, barely. By midday, you're on the mend. A bit of bread, another mug of beer, and a promise to yourself that you'll never do this again, a vow as fragile as a medieval roof in a rainstorm. Life goes on. You'll return to your work, avoid the wise woman's herbal hangover cure, and politely refuse all future invitations to drink with the blacksmith, at least until the next feast. So if you ever wake up in your own bed, headache-free, with nothing more dangerous in your system than last night's chamomile tea, take a moment to be grateful. Because in the Middle Ages, surviving a hangover was proof you were tough enough to survive anything, including your own curiosity about turnip wine. The village midwife offers you her best sleeping draught: 1 part poppy juice, 2 parts wild lettuce, and a dash of wine. Don't ask about side effects. In the morning, you might wake up in your own bed, or in the neighbour's cowshed. Let's be honest, medieval sleep is already a dicey proposition. Your mattress is stuffed with straw, your blanket smells like wet goat, and your roommate is a rooster who doesn't understand the concept of personal space. If you're lucky, you drift off to the gentle lullaby of rain on a leaky roof. If you're unlucky, you're serenaded by the sound of your neighbour's son practicing his bagpipes at midnight and the eternal scratching of fleas plotting their next move. It's no wonder you can't sleep. That's where the local midwife comes in. She's the unofficial town expert in all things birth, death, and bedtime. Her remedies are legendary. Sometimes for working, sometimes for what happens when they don't. She takes her craft seriously, rolling out a collection of bottles and jars with labels like Dream Dew, Night's Embrace, and Try at Your Own Risk. Her methods are less science and more folk tradition meets controlled chaos. You tell her you haven't slept in 3 nights. She nods, thoughtfully sprinkles a few poppy seeds into a mug, and follows up with wild lettuce, an herb whose only proven effect is making salads taste like disappointment. Then comes the wine, splashed in with the confident hand of someone who knows there are worse things than tipsy sleepwalking. She hands you the mug with a twinkle in her eye. "Drink this and count sheep," she says. You wonder if she means literal sheep or the ones that occasionally wander through your open front door. You take a sip. It tastes like bad salad mixed with cough syrup and a hint of hope. 5 minutes later, your eyelids are heavy and you're starting to believe that maybe, just maybe, you'll sleep through the night. Except this is medieval medicine. Side effects aren't so much possible as inevitable. There's a good chance you'll wake up disoriented, clutching a turnip, and halfway through reciting a prayer you don't remember learning. Sometimes you dream of flying. Sometimes you dream of tax collectors. Sometimes you dream you're being chased through the village by a talking sausage, which, in your groggy state, feels more real than the actual livestock. Still, anything is better than lying awake in the dark, listening to the wind rattle the shutters and your joints crack with every toss and turn. And the midwife isn't your only source for sleep aids. The apothecary sells dormouse tonic, a concoction that claims to quiet the soul but mostly quiets your stomach, and the village wise woman swears by her own recipe: nettle tea, honey, and a few drops of something she calls the moon's blessing. The last person who tried it woke up convinced he was a bishop. Some remedies are less about plants and more about ritual. Place a shoe under your pillow, hang rosemary over your door, and make sure you never ever look a weasel in the eye before bedtime. Superstition is strong, especially on sleepless nights. Your grandmother will tell you to drink hot milk. Your uncle recommends a shot of really strong ale. Your cousin insists you just need to work harder in the fields, which explains why he hasn't slept since Easter. The truth is, medieval people will try anything for a good night's rest. And who can blame them? Between the lumpy beds, the unpredictable weather, and the nightly chorus of livestock, rest is a luxury. So if a poppy-laced potion helps, even a little, you'll risk the occasional morning spent waking up with straw in your hair and a pig as your big spoon. As the sun rises and you stagger awake, whether in your own home, the neighbour's barn, or somewhere in between, you're just grateful you got a few hours of peace. Sleep, after all, is the original medieval miracle cure, and in a world this exhausting, you'll take every drop you can get. You wander through the monastery garden as Brother Thomas lists all the plants that bring peace. By peace, he means a nap so deep you might accidentally skip to next Wednesday. It's a brisk morning in the cloister, and you're here for one reason: sleep, or at least the monastic approximation of it. Brother Thomas greets you with a serene smile and the kind of energy that suggests he's already had 2 mugs of herbal clarity. He gestures to the orderly rows of sage, valerian, poppy, and a few mysterious greens that the abbot insists are for spiritual purposes only. You're not sure what that means, but the monastery's cat keeps napping under the valerian, and you're starting to suspect it's found enlightenment. Monks are the undisputed champions of medieval medicine. They read, they write, and they experiment, sometimes successfully, sometimes less so. Every brother has a specialty. Brother Peter is a genius with digestive complaints. Brother Martin brews the best ales. And Brother Thomas, well, his real talent is in concocting what he delicately calls the blessed sleep. If you mention you're having trouble resting, Thomas lights up and immediately offers you a tour of the garden, complete with a lecture on every plant's heavenly virtues and a story about that one time he put half the monastery to sleep during Vespers. Secret recipes abound in the scriptorium. Tucked between pages on theology are little notes: how to make a calming tea, the best ratio of poppy to wild lettuce, and when to add honey for mercy's sake. The brothers swear by their mixtures: valerian root for anxiety, chamomile for headaches, and poppy for when even the abbot can't get through matins without yawning. Sometimes they blend it all into a draught so potent it could put a bishop into a spiritual coma. And it's not just sleep. Monastic medicine covers everything from coughs to colic. Need an appetite? Fennel and mint. Achy knees from too much genuflecting? St. John's wort with a touch of blessed oil. Trouble with melancholia, which is medieval for life is hard and everything hurts. Brother Thomas brews a wine so sweet and herby that you forget what you were sad about. Though in fairness, you also forget your own name for about 20 minutes. Preparation is a sacred ritual. The brothers harvest each plant at dawn, always with a prayer, sometimes with a bit of hymn singing for good luck. Dried, chopped, and stored in labelled jars, their remedies fill the monastery with earthy, soothing scents that almost cover the smell of the scriptorium's ink and the kitchen's endless lentil stew. Of course, word gets out. Soon, villagers are knocking at the monastery gate at all hours, hoping for a sip of the secret elixir or, failing that, a nap on a sun-warmed cloister bench. The monks never turn anyone away, they're sworn to help after all, but they do keep the best recipes to themselves. There's a rumour that Brother Thomas once invented a draught so powerful that the abbot lost a whole week, and the garden gained 3 new statues, as you accept a small bottle of peaceful rest. Instructions: sip before bedtime. Do not operate ploughs or debate the priest. Brother Thomas gives you a gentle warning. Too much, and you'll miss next Sunday's sermon. Too little, and you'll hear every rooster in the county. You thank him and slip away, feeling a little lighter, a little drowsier, and secretly hoping you wake up somewhere you recognize. In a world full of chaos, war, famine, plagues, and barnyard insomnia, monastic medicine is a gentle, leafy oasis. The secret recipes are part science, part faith, and part let's see what happens. If you're lucky, you'll drift off to sleep and wake up refreshed. If not, you'll have a great story for the next feast. Either way, you'll owe Brother Thomas a thank you, and maybe, next time, a stronger cup of coffee for the abbot. Dinner is being served, and the cook's secret ingredient tonight is hemp seed. It's nutritious, filling, and, if you eat enough, liable to turn even the hardest medieval bread into a magical experience. Let's set the table. You're hunched on a 3-legged stool at a wobbly wooden table, staring at a steaming bowl of something that's mostly turnips and hope. The cook, brandishing a ladle like a scepter, ladles out the daily pottage and gives you a wink. Bit of a surprise in there tonight, she says, and you know from grim experience that this could mean anything from a dead fly to a live one. But tonight, it's different. The air smells faintly nutty, and the bread, usually a medieval exercise in jaw strength, looks almost inviting. Hemp seed is the star ingredient, and in the Middle Ages, it's as close as you'll get to a superfood. Packed with oil, protein, and the faint possibility of daydreams, hemp seed shows up in everything. Porridge, soup, cakes, and even that infamous loaf of break, your tooth bread. It's food for the body, a tiny treat for the mind. And, on days when there's nothing else, it's what stands between you and an evening spent gnawing on boiled shoe leather. The local cook swears by it. She claims hemp seed can make any meal better, though her standards were last seen running away with the town baker. She'll grind it into meal for thickening soups, sprinkle it over salads, if you can call 2 leaves and a snail a salad, or work it into cakes for feast days. There's even a rumour she once made hemp seed butter, but it was so popular that the Lord ate it all before anyone else could get a taste. To this day, the servants eye the pantry with suspicion whenever he starts humming. The true magic, though, is what hemp does to bread. Medieval bread is legendary, but not for the reasons you want. Usually dense, sometimes gritty, and always a gamble, it could double as a building material. Hemp seed, with its oils and nutty flavour, softens the loaf just enough that you can break off a hunk without risking dental disaster. The kitchen is suddenly full of grateful sighs as villagers bite into a loaf that doesn't bite back. There are side effects, of course. Eat enough hemp seed porridge and you'll feel a warm sense of well-being that's only partially caused by hunger pangs subsiding. Some say it helps soothe aching muscles and calms the spirit after a long day of mud-wrestling livestock. Others just appreciate not having to chip their dinner out of a loaf shaped like a rock. There are even whispered stories about hemp cake at weddings, guests mysteriously cheerful, the bride's mother briefly forgetting to complain about everything, and the groom declaring the soup absolutely profound. But the real secret of cannabis in the medieval kitchen is versatility. On fasting days, when eggs, meat, and even laughter are banned by the church, hemp seed steps in to fill the gap. It's technically allowed, thoroughly humble, and, unlike some of the other medieval delicacies, won't make you regret your choices in the morning. The cook stirs it into everything, hoping for a nod of approval from the priest and a thank you from the Lord, though both are more likely to just ask for seconds. After dinner, you sit back with a full belly and a mild sense of euphoria. It's possible that's just the relief of not having to eat more boiled cabbage. Or maybe it's the hemp, gently working its way into your bones, loosening the knots in your shoulders and letting you forget for just a moment that you have to get up and do it all again tomorrow. As the candles burn down, you find yourself smiling. Tonight, medieval life tastes almost good. The bread is only slightly dangerous, and everyone is just a little bit happier, thanks to the humble hemp seed. Tomorrow, the cook will go back to her usual experiments, but for now, you bask in the gentle, nutty afterglow of the best dinner you've had in weeks. Not every medieval lady packs jewelry. Some stash a jar of imported opium for headaches, heartbreaks, and the kind of long banquets where the lute solo goes on for hours. Imagine the scene. The castle's great hall, bustling with silks, whispered gossip, and the unmistakable aroma of questionable poultry. You're a noblewoman, trussed up in enough linen and velvet to qualify as a walking tapestry, and your dowry chest is your private treasure vault. Most expect to find pearls, gold, and maybe a hair ribbon or two. What they don't know is that nestled beneath the embroidery sits a small, precious jar of opium, your secret weapon against the aches and existential crises of noble life. Life as a lady sounds grand, but the reality is a never-ending cycle of feast planning, dowry negotiations, and trying to keep the family's pet falcon from eating the servants. Then there are the social obligations. Hours spent pretending to care about your cousin's embroidery. The Lord's hunting stories, which grow in size every retelling, and banquets so long the bread has time to turn stale, revive, and go stale again. So when the headache from your headdress, currently weighing as much as a holiday ham, becomes too much, you reach for your hidden jar. The apothecary calls it the spice of the East, but you call it survival. A dab on your tongue may be swirled into honey, and the pounding at your temples recedes to a gentle medieval thrum. Suddenly, the lute solo doesn't seem so bad. In fact, you're half convinced the lute player is inventing a new genre, sleepy folk. But opium isn't just for headaches. Medieval heartbreak is a competitive sport. especially when you discover that your intended has the emotional range of boiled cabbage, or that your marriage contract now includes a flock of geese you're expected to love as your own. Suffering through the first heartbreak, you learn quickly why the older ladies always look so serene during romantic tragedies. Opium laced comfort cakes with a chaser of spiced wine. Heartache dulled. Drama muted. Family dinner actually tolerable. And let's not forget about nerves. Noble women are expected to glide through life, but reality is more like stumbling through a hallway full of overexcited dogs. Banquets are their own trial by fire, endless toasts, recitals, and the ever-present threat of someone unexpectedly bursting into song. You keep your jar of opium close at hand, tucked between sachets of lavender and secret love notes you'll never send. One spoonful, and you're able to nod along to the bishop's speech about piety while daydreaming of a world where you can wear shoes that don't double as torture devices. Of course, the secret is not quite as secret as you'd hope. The castle's staff knows. They're discreet, but you notice the cook's knowing wink when she sees you stir honey into your tea, and the maid's understanding smile when you ask for a bit of extra quiet after dinner. Among noble women, opium is an open secret, shared during long afternoons in the solar as you trade recipes for headache cures, gossip about the latest marriage scandal, and compare the merits of various imported sleep remedies. It's not all blissful oblivion, of course. Too much opium, and you risk missing the end of the feast, or worse, waking up halfway through and realizing the bard has started his third comic epic. There's also the small matter of supply. Imported opium is expensive, precious, and occasionally subject to accusations of witchcraft if the wrong priest finds out. You keep your jar well hidden, locked away with your other treasures, and only brought out when life is at its most overwhelming. So the next time you see a noblewoman staring serenely out the window during yet another tedious evening, remember, her jewels may sparkle, but it's the jar of opium in her dowry chest that keeps her truly shining. In a world of endless banquets and heavy crowns, a little poppy power goes a long, long way. The town alchemist is back at it again, promising eternal youth in a bottle that smells like boiled socks. Most medieval elixirs are 90% wishful thinking, and 10% things that will absolutely make you see imaginary dragons. Let's set the scene. It's a damp afternoon, and you're standing outside the alchemist's ramshackle hut, lured by rumors of a potion that will grant you the vigor of a stag and the wisdom of Solomon. You step inside and instantly regret it. The air is thick with the aroma of burning herbs, singed hair, and whatever happens when cabbage goes bad in 3 different languages. Vials, flasks, and suspiciously bubbling cauldrons cover every available surface, each one promising transformation, enlightenment, or at the very least, a colourful rash. The alchemist himself is part scientist, part dreamer, and part local hazard. He greets you with wild eyes and soot-stained fingers, proudly unveiling his latest masterpiece, a cloudy green potion labelled Elixir of Ageless Wonder, do not inhale. You're not sure if that last instruction is a warning or an invitation, but you're desperate enough to take the risk. Besides, how much worse can life get? You already sleep on straw and share your living space with livestock. The alchemist's ingredients are equal parts exotic and alarming. He waves dried mandrake root, a pinch of something labelled unicorn dust, which you suspect is just ground-up chicken bone, and a generous splash of spirits of wine. He assures you that it's all been tested on his apprentice, who has since taken up beekeeping and refuses to talk about last Thursday. With a flourish, the alchemist pours the concoction into a pewter cup and urges you to drink. It tastes, predictably, like boiled socks and regret. There's an initial rush, a warmth in your belly, a tingling in your toes, and, after a moment, a very real sense that the cat on the windowsill is judging you in perfect Latin. You ask the alchemist if this is normal, and he nods, already scribbling in a notebook about possible side effects. Increased honesty, feline fluency, mild existential terror. But for every miracle promised, there are at least 3 surprises. Sometimes the elixirs work, your backache fades, your warts vanish, and you feel just a bit more hopeful. Other times, you spend the evening convinced you're the rightful heir to the moon, or you start seeing colours that don't have names yet. The alchemist insists these are necessary steps on the road to true understanding, and hands you a pamphlet on hermetic philosophy you can't read because it's upside down. Word spreads fast whenever a new elixir is ready. The townsfolk line up outside, eager for love potions, beauty tonics, and the ever-popular potion of courage, which suspiciously tastes exactly like strong ale. Some claim miraculous results. The baker's wife hasn't complained in days. The miller swears his left leg grew an inch, and the parish priest is convinced he's finally cracked the secret of the Holy Trinity, though he's since taken a vow of silence, possibly for everyone's safety. Of course, accidents happen. The apprentice's eyebrows have yet to recover from the elixir of instant wisdom, and one batch of potion of flight resulted in 3 bruised egos and a minor roof repair. Nobody blames the alchemist, though. In a world this unpredictable, a little chaos is expected, and if your elixir makes you temporarily believe you're a chicken, at least you have a great story for market day. So, as you leave the hut, slightly dizzy and unsure whether your nose has always been this big, you marvel at the resilience of hope. In medieval times, alchemy isn't just science. It's the original self-help movement. You try a potion, you cross your fingers, and if you're lucky, the only thing you lose is your sense of skepticism. In a world of endless aches, woes, and unidentifiable stains, the promise of magic in a bottle is sometimes all you need, even if it tastes like boiled socks and wild imagination. The local wise woman hands you a potion to ward off evil spirits. Ingredients: herbs, prayers, and possibly a splash of something that smells like last week's beer. You drink it, just in case. Welcome to the medieval countryside, where every village has a wise woman, or 3, known for her uncanny ability to heal, hex, or host a decent tea party. The wise woman's cottage is equal parts apothecary, gossip centre, and museum of things you'd rather not touch. You walk in seeking relief from a headache, a rash, or a vague sense that the neighbour's goose is plotting against you. Instead, you're greeted by shelves overflowing with dried flowers, bundles of something green and prickly, and a row of bottles whose contents range from definitely mint to don't ask. The wise woman takes her time. She inspects your palm, listens to your pulse, and gives you a look that says she knows exactly what you did with the baker's daughter last Michaelmas. Then she bustles about, muttering to herself, gathering herbs from jars and whispering prayers in a language no one else in the village speaks, unless you count the village priest, who pretends not to. Her remedies are always special. Sometimes they work, sometimes you end up hallucinating that you've finally outrun your debts. The centerpiece of her healing is always the potion, a cloudy mixture ladled into a chipped mug, warm from sitting next to the fire. The aroma is complex. Underneath the herbs, there's a certain barnyard zest, and just the faintest whiff of regret. Drink it while it's hot, she urges. You obey, mostly because you're too afraid of what will happen if you say no. What's in it? The list changes daily. Mugwort for dreams, nettles for aches, a dash of rosemary for remembrance. On especially unlucky days, she adds a splash of courage, tonic, homemade beer that's been left out long enough to develop its own personality. And prayers, always prayers, whispered over the cup, traced in the air, and sometimes written on scraps of parchment tucked under the mug for extra potency. The wise woman insists this is what keeps evil spirits away, though it's possible they just can't stand the smell. She'll tell you stories as you sip. How the potion once helped the smith's wife recover from a bad wind, or how old Tom survived his ill-fated romance with the neighbour's pig thanks to a triple dose. There's a charm for every complaint, and a proverb for every doubt. It's not just what you take, she says, it's how you believe it will help. If you squint, You realize this is either deep wisdom or a polite way to say, "It's out of my hands now." Results vary. Sometimes you wake up feeling better, cured, invigorated, and, at least for a while, less haunted by geese or guilt. Other times you sleep for 16 hours, dream about being crowned the king of turnips, and wake up with the neighbor's dog using your foot as a pillow. Still, even when the potion doesn't do exactly what you'd hoped, the ritual itself is oddly comforting. The wise woman listens, offers sympathy, and reminds you that a little faith, plus a lot of bitter herbs, can get you through almost anything. Of course, there are risks. Drink too much, and you may find yourself at the village pond, attempting to negotiate peace between the frogs and the local children. The priest might grumble about dabbling in the dark arts, but even he has been spotted seeking a remedy for his recurring sermon hiccups. At the end of the day, you realize the wise woman's true magic isn't in her potions, but in her presence, a reminder that, when life is rough, someone will listen to your woes, hand you a cup of something questionable, and assure you that everything, evil spirits included, will look better by sunrise. In medieval times, that's the best medicine of all. It's St. Swithin's Day, which means the beer is flowing, the hemp cakes are fresh, and you're starting to suspect that half the village is possessed by something in the soup. Feast days are the medieval answer to a weekend bender, except instead of sleeping it off on Sunday, you get to parade through town, sing dubious hymns, and dance badly around the maypole while the parish priest pretends not to notice you're all on your fourth mug of special ale. It's a time when all the usual rules are put aside, and everyone, lord, peasant, and even the livestock lets loose. The preparations begin at dawn. The cook, a woman of questionable morals but impeccable seasoning, is already baking trays of hemp cakes, muttering about last year's incident with the dancing cow. Children are assigned to fetch firewood. Villagers decorate everything in sight with wildflowers and suspiciously sticky ribbons, and the brewer hauls out barrels of beer strong enough to clean a wound, or, if you're not careful, open one. As the village green fills up, the atmosphere transforms. The air is thick with roasting meat, boiling stew, and the distant, unmistakable tang of someone accidentally setting the bread on fire. Tables groan under the weight of pies, sausages, and platters of hemp seed pottage. No one knows exactly who first decided that hemp belonged in everything from biscuits to porridge, but no one's complaining. After a few servings, even your neighbour's never-ending complaints about moles sound philosophical. And the soup, oh, the soup. Every household brings a different ingredient, creating a bubbling cauldron of culinary optimism and thinly disguised leftovers. The result is equal parts delicious, dangerous, and, for reasons no one can explain, mildly hypnotic. After a few bowls, old Mrs. Barlow is convinced she can speak to crows. The miller tries to teach his donkey to waltz, and the local priest quietly excuses himself to check the candles every time someone offers him a second helping. Drinks flow as the sun climbs higher. Small beer for the children, because hydration matters even on feast days. Proper ale for the grown-ups, and a mysterious punch that no one admits to making but everyone enjoys. After a while the songs begin. Old folk tunes about doomed lovers, victorious saints, and the occasional turnip that saves the day. You find yourself arm in arm with the blacksmith, belting out a chorus that grows more enthusiastic and less coherent with every verse. By mid-afternoon, inhibitions have been left behind, along with common sense. Someone starts a sack race with live chickens. The baker and the shepherd stage a debate about the proper way to eat pottage, which devolves into interpretive dance. The children are covered in mud. At least one cow is wearing a garland, and the mare is asleep under the table, muttering about the spirit of St. Swithin and snoring to the beat of the festival drum. Evening brings fireworks in the form of a massive bonfire, more singing, and stories shared around the flames. The line between feast and fever dream blurs, as laughter rises and even the grumpiest villagers are swept up in the joy. Yes, there's something odd about the soup, and yes, your head will ache tomorrow, but for tonight you're not just surviving, you're part of a riotous, ridiculous, utterly unforgettable celebration. As the stars come out, you stumble home with a full belly, a lighter heart, and an inkling that perhaps there really was something magical in that soup. Tomorrow, there will be stories about the singing geese, the talking crows, and the inexplicable urge to hug every tree in sight. But tonight, as you drift off to sleep, you're grateful for feast days and the wonderful, wobbly, hemp-laced chaos they bring to medieval life. You're caught with a bag of suspicious herbs. Is it medicine, or the reason you'll be lectured by the priest for 3 hours? The line between legal and illegal substances is thinner than your neighbour's porridge. Let's face it, if you've ever wondered how war on drugs would play out in a world where most people can't read, congratulations, you're living it. The medieval approach to drug laws is part guesswork, part superstition, and entirely up to whoever is in charge of the town on any given week. You might be carrying a perfectly legitimate headache remedy, or you might be accused of conspiring with witches, depending entirely on the weather and how recently the constable had a good meal. The average villager relies on herbs for everything: sleep, pain, heartbreak, and that strange rash that refuses to leave. Folk healers mix up potions from mugwort, poppy, hemp, and anything else that doesn't run away fast enough. Some are harmless. Others are a one-way ticket to a conversation with Saint Peter. But what's legal? That depends. If you're caught with poppy syrup, it's a cure for sleeplessness, unless someone decides it's an instrument of moral decay. If you have hemp seeds, they're food, unless you add too many leaves and the village reeve's nephew starts seeing double at the maypole dance. The church, unsurprisingly, is very interested in what goes into your body. Some monks are enthusiastic herbalists, filling their gardens with plants to cure every ailment and then writing down the recipes in Latin so nobody else can understand them. Other clergymen see the devil's handiwork in every dried root. If you're unlucky, you'll be summoned to the church porch, where Father Bernard will hold up your stash and lecture you on the dangers of foul temptation. The 3-hour version includes a musical interlude by the choir and ends with a warning that God knows what you did with that mugwort. Local laws are even less reliable. One year, the Lord decides that henbane is forbidden because his wife started talking to imaginary hedgehogs. The next year, the village healer uses it to cure the Lord's headaches, and it's back in fashion. Opium? Sometimes celebrated as a miracle for pain, sometimes lumped together with the kind of foreign sorcery that makes local magistrates nervous. Occasionally, someone remembers to check the king's proclamations, but by the time the news arrives, everyone's already moved on to the next hot herb. Then there's the town gossip. If your neighbour is jealous of your garden, suddenly your rosemary bush is unnaturally large, and you're a suspect. If the mayor's mother-in-law is feeling generous, that same bush is evidence of God's green mercy. The line is so blurry that it's best to keep your potions in a jar labelled lentil soup and pray nobody ever asks for a taste. Witchcraft accusations are a constant threat. Being caught with a bundle of herbs is sometimes all it takes for someone to point and whisper, "She's got the devil's parsley." Before you know it, you're sitting in the town square while the wise woman testifies that yes, you did once mix hemp and poppy, but only to help the blacksmith's wife sleep through her husband's snoring. And let's not forget the nobles. What's illegal for peasants is a health regimen for the rich. The lord's wife can have a chest full of poppy syrup, imported sleeping stones, and a bottle labelled Midnight Courage without a second glance. You, meanwhile, get side-eyed for growing too much fennel. Ultimately, the only real law is don't get caught. Or if you do, make sure you have a very convincing explanation and maybe a spare pie for the constable. Whether your herbs are medicine or mischief, survival in medieval times means navigating the ever-shifting landscape of law, rumour, and religious panic. So, if you find yourself in trouble, just remember, keep your head down, your herbs hidden, and never ever share your secret recipe with the choir boys. You're suffering from medieval withdrawal, and the local priest is convinced you're possessed. Someone brings out holy water. Someone else brings more beer. This is medieval medicine at its finest, caught somewhere between the world of science and the realm of maybe the devil did it. Let's say you've run out of your nightly dose of poppy syrup or your last pinch of hemp. Suddenly, you're sweating, shivering, and muttering about the color of the walls. To the modern mind, these are classic symptoms of withdrawal. To your neighbors, you've either got a case of the wind or you're hiding a small demon under your hat. The priest arrives armed with holy water and a determination that could curdle fresh milk. He listens to your woes, notes your twitchy behavior and haunted eyes, and immediately skips over illness in favor of possession. He sprinkles holy water, prays loudly, and recommends a long confession, preferably one that covers every bad decision since your christening. His theory: when your soul gets too used to herbal comfort, it leaves a spiritual vacancy that demons are all too happy to fill. To be fair, after 3 days off the poppy syrup, you're open to anything that will make the headache stop, even an exorcism. Your family, meanwhile, takes a more practical approach. Grandma insists you just need to sweat it out. She plops you in front of the fire, wraps you in 3 blankets, and brews a tea so bitter you suspect it's just hot pond water. She means well, but after your second cup, you're seeing spots and pondering the meaning of rock bottom while a chicken tries to nest in your lap. The neighbors hear the commotion and come running. Someone brings fresh beer because, in medieval logic, if you're shaking, you must be thirsty. Someone else offers a mug of courage wine, laced with a little leftover poppy, just in case this is more medical than supernatural. Before long, you're the center of a community crisis, a cross between a medieval intervention and a very poorly organized bake sale. Superstition is everywhere. Withdrawal shakes, that's elf shot. Strange dreams, must be the work of fairies. Or perhaps you offended the village's guardian saint by refusing seconds at last Sunday's feast. In the Middle Ages, there's a folk explanation for everything. The only real cure for addiction is time, a supportive family, and not letting the priest find out about your stash of emergency mandrake under the mattress. But addiction is not just a peasant's problem. The local lord's sister is quietly hooked on soothing wine, and half the clergy depend on holy syrup to make it through midnight prayers. They hide it better, but everyone knows. Still, when withdrawal comes calling, the symptoms are always the same. Nerves, sweats, an unshakable feeling that something is missing, and a deep, philosophical need for just one more cup of literally anything. The priest, of course, wants a miracle. He'll perform blessings, chant psalms, and, if all else fails, recommend a pilgrimage to the nearest shrine. But most villagers know the truth. There are no easy cures, just a lot of waiting, sweating, and creative herbal teas. You ride out the worst of it surrounded by a chorus of prayers, the occasional sprinkle of holy water, and enough beer to float a small fishing boat. Eventually the fever breaks, your head clears, the village breathes a collective sigh of relief, and everyone returns to pretending you just had a touch of summer fever. The priest offers a final blessing, your family welcomes you back with soup, and the neighbors quietly ask if you're holding on to any extra poppy syrup, for emergencies, of course. So, the next time you think about modern detox routines, just remember, in medieval times, your choices were limited. It was holy water, beer, and whatever magic the wise woman could brew. If you survived, you were considered cured, and probably owed the local priest a very large candle. It turns out the rich aren't just addicted to land and power. They're quietly hooked on poppy tinctures, and nobody wants to mention it, especially not at church. Picture this, a grand stone manor, all stained glass, echoing halls, and a suspiciously large collection of velvet cushions. The lord of the manor is draped across his chaise lounge in a pose meant to evoke deep thought, but it's really just so he doesn't have to stand up. At his elbow sits a delicate silver vial, ornately etched with lions, griffins, and, if you look close, a poppy blossom or two, hiding in plain sight. These are the secrets of the medieval upper crust. While peasants dose themselves with home-brewed remedies and wise woman potions, the nobles have access to the finest imported opium, poppy syrup, and elixirs straight from the Venetian apothecary, who, conveniently, never asks questions and always accepts gold. In the noble household, a headache is never just a headache. It's an opportunity to break out the special tonic, best enjoyed in private chambers behind a locked door, or during the third hour of a particularly boring mass. Officially, poppy tinctures are for ailments, migraines, female troubles, and that mysterious condition known only as nerves. Unofficially, the Lord's favourite excuse is preparing for diplomacy, which apparently requires spending hours contemplating the ceiling and occasionally giggling at the chandelier. Lady Marjorie, meanwhile, has her own stash, hidden in the false bottom of a jewellery box, used to survive long embroidery sessions, tedious poetry recitals, and the horror of listening to her cousin play the lute off-key for the 100th time. The staff are well aware. The steward pretends not to notice when the master's morning medicine leaves him blissed out for the entire afternoon. The chambermaids quietly refill bottles with diluted wine, praying nobody notices the difference. The family physician, who is paid handsomely to look concerned and write indecipherable Latin notes, recommends modest use, then accepts his own dose as payment. Even the chaplain, ever eager to protect his lord's soul, looks the other way unless he's in on the stash himself. What makes it all so hush-hush is the reputation game. Nobles live and die by appearances, robust health, good breeding, and the ability to endure 9-hour banquets without openly weeping into the gravy. Admitting to a poppy habit is out of the question, even as everyone develops a suspicious fondness for herbal cordial and digestive drops. Gossip flows like mead, but direct confrontation is rare. Instead, there are endless coded conversations. How is the Lord's sleep? Lady Marjorie seems so serene these days. Is it true the Baron's new apothecary studied in Baghdad? No one says the word addicted. That's a peasant's problem. This is a refined taste. Of course, overindulgence has its perils. There are rumours about lords sleeping through council meetings or ladies drifting off halfway through a tournament. Occasionally, someone's so relaxed they forget which side of the table they're supposed to sit on, or spend an entire afternoon convinced the family cat is reciting Latin poetry. The official story is always exhaustion, the weather, or something in the stew. Behind closed doors, the reality is simple. The rich are just as human as everyone else, only with better furniture and more expensive bad habits. Their poppy-laced evenings are filled with soft laughter, wild dreams, and the gentle assurance that tomorrow's troubles can wait. And as long as no one says it out loud, everything remains perfectly proper. Until, of course, the bishop comes to visit unannounced and finds half the household napping blissfully through evening prayers. So the next time you picture a medieval lord or lady, remember, underneath the velvet, the jewels, and the carefully curated dignity, there's a secret bottle of poppy tincture tucked away, proof that even the mighty need a little escape from the madness of medieval life, especially if it helps them survive another lute solo. At the annual Midsummer festival, the air is thick with wood smoke, laughter, and the suspiciously sweet smell of burning herbs. By midnight, half the village is either singing or hugging a tree. Welcome to the highlight of the medieval social calendar, the festival where everyone, from the tiniest child to the oldest crone, comes together to eat, drink, and temporarily forget about plague, taxes, and the ongoing battle with moles in the barley field. Preparation starts days in advance. Bonfires are built, barrels are rolled out, and a parade of pies, cheeses, and slightly burnt sausages appears as if by magic. But the real magic is in the air. Somewhere between the roasting meat and the mulled wine, you notice it, the unmistakable scent of something more than just firewood. That's because the herb man has arrived, his wagon piled high with dried bundles of sage, mugwort, and, depending on how adventurous the village is feeling, hemp or even a pinch of henbane. He trades packets for gossip, and everyone insists their recipe for festival stew is just traditional, which is medieval code for don't ask too many questions. As dusk falls, the party picks up speed. The ale flows freely, sometimes spiked with a little extra herbal spirit, courtesy of the wise woman, who claims it helps with dancing. The town fiddler tunes up, the first round of maypole dancing begins, and before you know it, The line between enthusiastic and possessed by the spirit of the festival starts to blur. Someone is always first to suggest smoking a little something for good luck. Suddenly, the festival fire is ringed with people who are slightly too invested in discussing the shape of clouds or the political motivations of sheep. The older villagers wink knowingly. It's all in good fun, they say, while sipping their herbal punch with an expression that suggests they're about to discover a new colour. The children, meanwhile, dart through the crowd with sticky hands and grass in their hair, entirely immune to the deeper mysteries of the festival but perfectly tuned to the sugar in the honey cakes. By the time the second round of hemp cakes is served, the singing has gotten noticeably louder, and the arguments over who can jump the bonfire, who the highest, are interrupted only by fits of giggles and the occasional impromptu nap under the tables. It's not all chaos, though. The festival is also about community and ritual. The herbs burned on the bonfire are said to ward off evil, bring good harvests, and, at least according to the apothecary, cure bad moods and sore knees. Couples sneak off to the edge of the fields to weave garlands. The blacksmith challenges the miller to a wrestling match. Loser has to clean the pigsty. And the priest gives his annual speech on moderation, which nobody hears because everyone's too busy howling at the moon. By midnight, you can't tell if the world is spinning from the dancing or the herbs. Someone is serenading the well. Someone else is convinced the old oak tree is giving excellent life advice. The mayor, a normally serious man, has climbed onto a hay bale and is reciting a love poem to his boots, while the wise woman gently reminds everyone to drink water, or at least something that isn't on fire. As the embers glow and the laughter fades, people begin to stumble home, wrapped in borrowed cloaks and the last lingering warmth of the herbal haze. The village green is littered with wildflower crowns, empty mugs, and the odd sleeping reveller dreaming contentedly of flying cows. The next morning, life returns to normal. The festival is a blur of memory, half real and wholly absurd. But for a brief, herb-scented night, everyone in the village was just a little lighter, a little freer, and maybe, just maybe, a little bit happier for having hugged a tree and sung to the stars. In the world of medieval festivals, that's a victory worth celebrating. You want to quit your poppy habit. The only detox center available is your own willpower, a locked barn, and your grandmother's advice. Just eat more onions. There's no pamphlet, no hotline, and certainly no spa-like retreat with scented towels and inspirational quotes. In the 14th century, Rehab means barricading yourself somewhere no one can hear you sob, while your extended family stands guard outside, offering motivational support in the form of boiled root vegetables and the occasional threat to let the chickens keep you company. Your grandmother is the self-appointed chief of medicine. She bustles in and out of the barn, arms loaded with onions, garlic, and dubious home remedies. "Sweat it out," she commands, opening every window and door to make sure the draft is just uncomfortable enough to remind you of your sins. She brings endless onion broth. Convinced that a good, hearty vegetable can cure anything, melancholy, heartbreak, possession, or a mild addiction to medieval narcotics. You try to rest on a pile of hay that's equal parts straw and questionable smells, but sleep is a cruel, fleeting guest. Night sweats, headaches, and wild dreams keep you tossing. You hallucinate conversations with the barn cat, who offers surprisingly solid life advice, while your body insists that a dose of poppy syrup would be the perfect nightcap. Instead, you get more onion stew and the encouragement of your cousin, who tells you about the time he quit spiced ale for Lent and still shivers at the memory. Withdrawal is not for the faint of heart. One minute you're shivering under 3 blankets, the next you're sweating so much the chickens ask if you're planning to hatch something. The village wise woman visits, offers you a pouch of soothing herbs, and a pep talk about how true courage is in the gut. You're pretty sure she means literal guts, considering how much garlic she's slipped into your soup. For distraction, your family brings in entertainment. Your uncle tries to juggle turnips, badly. Your little sister sings you ballads about heroic cabbages. And the local priest drops by to say a few prayers and recommend confession, just in case. It's not exactly a modern spa. There's no music, unless you count the cows mooing at dawn and the gentle chorus of snoring from the goat pen. Your pillow is a sack of barley, and your daily exercise consists of pacing the length of the barn, plotting escape, and dodging droppings. Occasionally, you wonder if being addicted was actually easier, but as the days crawl by, something changes. The shakes become less severe, the cravings dull at the edges, and you start to feel more human, though you'll never look at onions the same way again. The world outside the barn becomes less terrifying. Your family brings in fresh bread, and someone sneaks you a sliver of honeycomb to celebrate making it through another night without screaming. You even manage to nap, dreaming only of slightly aggressive vegetables. When you finally emerge, blinking into the sunlight, the whole village is waiting. They cheer, they hug you briefly because you smell like barn and onions, and they tell you how brave you are, braver than the time old Tom faced down the angry sheep. Your grandmother beams with pride, declares you cured, and recommends you celebrate with a bowl of, yes, more onion soup. You're not cured by modern standards, but you've survived the medieval version of Rehab, sheer stubbornness, family support, and the unwavering power of root vegetables. There's no certificate, no badge, but there is a sense of accomplishment, and a barn cat who now follows you everywhere, convinced you're some sort of saint. So next time you're tempted by the poppy syrup, remember the locked barn, your grandmother's onions, and the look on your cousin's face when he tried to juggle them. In medieval times, that's as good as clean gets. And if you ever need motivation to stay sober, just think, it's either this or another week with the chickens. Someone's collapsed at the fair. Was it the mouldy bread, the opium wine, or just a classic case of medieval dehydration? The doctor prescribes more wine and a nice, long nap. If you wake up, you're cured. Welcome to the medieval emergency room, a sun-dappled patch of grass behind the pig pen, 2 nervous apprentices, and a collection of bottles, herbs, and prayer beads that look suspiciously like last year's leftovers. There's no stretcher, no triage nurse, and definitely no privacy curtain. Just a crowd of villagers, each with their own theory on what, exactly, has caused today's grand collapse. Let's rewind. Fairs in the Middle Ages are a sensory overload. Roasting meat, sticky sweets, strong ale, questionable stew, and treats like mouldy rye bread that's more psychedelic than nutritious. Toss in a handful of hemp cakes, a mug of the apothecary's energizing cordial, and a sip, or 3, of poppy-laced wine, and you have the perfect recipe for what the village healer cheerfully calls unexpected napping. The moment someone keels over, face down in the maypole ribbons, the crowd leaps into action. Aunt Mildred fans them with her apron. The blacksmith offers to carry them to the healing spot, which is usually a shady patch under a tree with a nice view of the juggler. The baker swears he saw it coming, and the priest rushes in to offer prayers, just in case this is a spiritual crisis in disguise. Enter the doctor, if you're lucky enough to have one in your village. He's part healer, part chemist, and part magician. His qualifications include 3 years as an apprentice, a handwritten note from the monastery, and the fact that he owns more than 2 books. He surveys the patient, sweaty, pale, mumbling about dancing goats, and immediately launches into the standard medieval diagnostic process: sniff the breath, whine, check the pulse, erratic, and ask what they ate, everything. Was it the mouldy bread? Rye infected with ergot can turn a simple sandwich into a psychedelic adventure. Was it the relaxing wine? Opium-infused vintages are all the rage at fairs. 1 cup makes the lute sound tolerable, 2 cups, and you're negotiating trade deals with invisible saints. Maybe it was just dehydration, that classic medieval health crisis. Hours in the sun, too much dancing, not enough safe water. Whatever the cause, the cure is always the same. Let them sleep it off. The doctor hands over a mug of weak wine, safer than water, and believed to restore balance to the humours. Sometimes he mixes in a drop of something herbal, just to impress the onlookers. The village wise woman brings a cold cloth for the forehead and mutters an incantation, just in case the fairies are involved. Everyone gathers round, sharing stories of the time my cousin fainted and dreamed he was a goose, or that day the blacksmith forgot his own name for an hour. Medical observation consists of waiting to see if you wake up. If you do, congratulations, you're cured. If you don't, it's time for a priest and a new round of gossip about the dangers of fair food. The phrase emergency medicine means hoping the patient is lucky, tough, and not allergic to medieval medical experiments. You might be prescribed more wine, a broth that tastes like boiled socks, or a gentle slap on the cheek to restore the spirit. Eventually you blink awake, staring up at a ring of concerned faces, a priest still praying, and the juggler taking bets on whether you'll try the apple pie next. Someone hands you a chunk of bread, fresh this time, and the healer advises less of the wine and more of the water, which everyone ignores until next year's fair. In medieval times, surviving a festival emergency is a matter of luck, community care, and a willingness to nap anywhere. There are no medical charts, but there are plenty of stories, and if you make it home with only a headache and a new respect for moderation, you're one of the lucky ones. Until the next fair, anyway. Not every medieval experiment ended well. A little too much poppy, a suspicious herbal tea, and suddenly, your afterlife is a lot closer than planned. The village priest prays for your soul, but the apothecary just adds another label to his shelf. Use less next time. In a world with no warning labels, no emergency rooms, and only the vaguest idea of what a safe dose might be, the line between remedy and ruin is alarmingly thin. Medieval medicine is a hopeful game of guesswork. Every herbal mixture, syrup, or powdered root is a tiny adventure in chemistry. Sometimes you wake up pain-free, sometimes you just don't wake up at all. Take poppy, for example. One pinch in your evening wine, and you sleep like a baby. 2 pinches, and you sleep like the local hermit who hasn't been seen since last harvest. 3, and, well, let's just say you're off to meet your ancestors a bit earlier than planned. The apothecary, who spends his days surrounded by jars labelled blessed thistle, dragon's blood, and possible antidote, tries his best. But with no way to measure or test, every dose is a leap of faith, yours. It doesn't help that medieval patients are eager for relief. Aching joints, chronic insomnia, persistent melancholia, also known as life in general. Most people are more than willing to try anything, and the local healers are more than willing to oblige. That soothing tea might include valerian, poppy, and a sprig of something that even the wise woman can't identify. It might cure your headache, or send you straight to a very peaceful sleep, one you don't come back from. There are, of course, warning signs. The healer's special elixir is supposed to make you drowsy, not comatose. But medieval logic isn't much for caution. If a little is good, more must be better. It's a principle that leads to stories like, remember old Hilda, who tried to cure her toothache and slept through a thunderstorm, a rooster crowing, and the annual tax collection. When someone fails to wake up, the village gathers. The priest is called to bless the body, offer prayers, and, if possible, quietly encourage everyone to be more careful with foreign plants. The family mourns, but there's always an undercurrent of dark humour, another cautionary tale for the next festival, another verse in the endless folk song of medieval trial and error. Meanwhile, the apothecary is undeterred. He adds a new label to the jar. Use less next time. There's no formal investigation, just a quietly whispered, well, now we know. The next batch of poppy syrup is a bit weaker, the next herbal tea slightly less adventurous, but the lessons learned are passed from healer to apprentice in hushed tones. Never give Uncle Oswald more than 1 spoonful. Don't mix the blue flowers with the brown roots. If it smells like funerals, put it back. Still, accidents happen. The nature of medieval medicine is improvisational, hopeful, and sometimes fatal. For every patient who drifts off into a gentle slumber, there's another who never wakes up from it. Death by drugs isn't a scandal, just a risk everyone accepts. A reminder that even comfort comes with consequences. The village moves on. The priest adds another name to his prayers. The apothecary fiddles with his recipes. The wise woman mutters about strong constitutions and starts brewing a milder tea. And the villagers, always practical, bury their dead with a little more caution and a lot more stories to tell. So next time you reach for a painkiller, remember, in the Middle Ages, relief was just as likely to be eternal. If you survived your dose, you celebrated. If not, at least the village got another useful label. Maybe try half. You've been nibbling hemp seed bread all day and suddenly crave something different. Enter the medieval munchies, a phenomenon that strikes after a few too many herbal teas or mysterious poppy cakes. You wander the village in search of a turnip dipped in honey, only to realize the honey's been borrowed by the local beekeeper, who's currently convinced his bees can predict the future. Welcome to snack time, medieval style, where cravings aren't satisfied by a quick trip to the pantry, but by a scavenger hunt through your neighbor's gardens, the kitchen scraps, and the ongoing town drama. The medieval munchies sneak up on you with no warning. One moment you're discussing theology with the cat. The next you're desperately searching for anything even vaguely edible, and maybe just a little sweet. Of course, this is no modern supermarket. There are no chips, no chocolate, and definitely no late-night pizza delivery. Your options are creative. After a generous slice of poppy seed cake and a cup of that sleepy tea the wise woman gave you, just for calming the nerves, dear, your mind turns towards snacks with laser-like focus. Everything suddenly seems possible. Even the leftover pottage looks appealing. Especially if you sprinkle a bit of ground hemp seed on top and pretend it's an exotic spice. You stagger into the communal kitchen, where the cook is already elbow-deep in bread dough and only mildly surprised to find you rummaging for just a little something. She eyes you knowingly and points to a plate of stale cheese, a half-eaten onion, and what might once have been a pear. You politely decline and set your sights higher. The honey pot. Unfortunately, the beekeeper is already one step ahead. He's hidden the village's honey, convinced the bees are sending him coded messages about the weather, the harvest, and the secret love life of the baker's daughter. Undeterred, you wander off in search of other treats. The turnip pile looks especially inviting. Under normal circumstances, a raw turnip is a last resort snack. But under the influence of herbal tea and low standards, it transforms into a delicacy. You contemplate dipping it in ale, smearing it with leftover hemp butter, or, if you're feeling bold, grilling it over the hearth fire. Medieval munchies encourage culinary innovation, sometimes genius, sometimes an abomination. Your craving grows more adventurous. You consider raiding the garden for peas, or maybe borrowing a carrot from the Lord's private stash. Careful, the last person who tried ended up spending a night in the stocks. Then you remember the chestnuts the miller's wife was roasting yesterday, and soon you're poking through the ashes, hoping nobody notices your foraging. Snack time in the Middle Ages is part hunger, part stealth mission. Of course, you're not alone. The local children are already way ahead of you, raiding the herb garden for wild sorrel and chasing each other around with handfuls of stolen nuts. The dog is rooting through yesterday's stew pot, and even the chickens are pecking enthusiastically at the crumbs under the table. It's a village-wide snack attack, and everyone's invited. Eventually, you cobble together a bizarre but satisfying feast. A hunk of hemp seed bread, a smear of questionable cheese, 3 roasted chestnuts, 1 slightly burnt, and the smallest drizzle of honey left behind by an absent-minded bee. You sit down by the fire, surrounded by the chorus of munchers, and savor the moment. Everything tastes better with a bit of imagination, and possibly the lingering effects of herbal relaxants. By midnight, your hunger is gone, replaced by a mild sense of accomplishment and a renewed respect for the humble turnip. The beekeeper, meanwhile, is still muttering about the Queen's prophecy. The children are asleep in a pile of hay, and the wise woman is already brewing her next mysterious digestive. In a world where a snack is never guaranteed, and cravings can't be satisfied by a quick run to the corner shop. Medieval munchies are both a challenge and a communal event. So next time you're hit with a craving, remember, in the Middle Ages, snacks are an adventure, especially after a slice of poppy cake and a long conversation with a very mysterious cat. The local constable catches you with a suspicious pouch of dried plants. Suddenly, you're not just a concerned peasant with allergies, you're on trial for witchcraft. Medieval law is fuzzy on what counts as illegal drugs and what's just your herbalist aunt's attempt at cough syrup. Either way, good luck convincing the court you're not about to summon a rainstorm with your oregano. In the Middle Ages, a bundle of dried leaves could turn you from model citizen to public enemy faster than you can say basil. One moment, you're innocently gathering mugwort for Aunt Maud's cough. The next, the whole village is whispering about your suspicious midnight gardening. It doesn't help that the constable, whose entire legal training consists of reading 3 parchments and remembering not to arrest the Lord's dog again, takes his job very seriously. He squints at your bag, sniffs it, and decides you must be up to something. Into the town square you go, herbs confiscated, dignity slipping. The wise woman tries to vouch for you. That's my parsley. For soup, not sorcery. But her reputation is already teetering on the edge after last year's incident with the magical beetroot. The villagers gather, eager for a little excitement between bad harvests and worse weather. Children chant, "Witch, witch," because it's more fun than school, and the blacksmith starts betting on how long until you start turning people into frogs. The local priest arrives to make things official. He gives you a stern look, then launches into a sermon on the dangers of unholy knowledge, which, in his mind, includes Latin, mathematics, and anything that grows in the shade. He points to your dried sage and poppy pods as evidence, muttering about foreign temptations and the peril of letting peasants dabble in wizardry. The parish record keeper is already prepping a new entry. Wednesday, herb panic. Public hysteria. Goose absconded. Your defense is less legal argument and more panicked improvisation. You try to explain that it's just for cough syrup, or maybe a nice tea to help with your back pain. But every explanation sounds more suspicious. The more you talk, the more the villagers are convinced you're about to hex the town's well or conjure a thunderstorm out of spite. After all, everyone remembers old Tom, who claimed his wife's nettle soup made him sprout hair on his ears, though, in fairness, Tom's memory is less than reliable. The evidence against you mounts. The wise woman's testimony is dismissed as biased. The children claim they saw you talking to a frog, which is mostly true but only because the frog hopped onto your shoe. The final nail is when the apothecary admits, under pressure, that he once saw you buying extra rosemary, clearly a sign of nefarious intent. If you're lucky, the sentence is mild, a fine, a stern warning, and maybe a public humiliation involving turnips. If you're not, you'll spend a night in the stocks, subjected to cabbage throwing and the dubious company of the town drunk, who offers unsolicited advice on herb etiquette. The wise woman slips you a real cure for your headache, hidden in a hollowed-out loaf of bread, of course. Eventually, the commotion dies down. Someone else is caught summoning rain by washing their feet, or the mayor's cow eats a batch of questionable mushrooms, and the attention shifts. You retrieve your herbs, a little wilted but intact, and vow to store them somewhere safer. Maybe with the baker, who everyone knows is above suspicion because his pies are heavenly. So, in the end, you survive your brush with medieval justice, a little wiser, a lot more cautious, and secretly proud that, for a brief moment, you had the whole village convinced you could turn oregano into rain. In medieval times, that's the true magic. Escaping with your herbs, your reputation mostly intact, and a brand new story to tell at the next feast. The knight next to you is moaning, again. Luckily, the field surgeon has a trusty bag of poppy syrup, cannabis poultices, and a flask of liquid courage. If you're lucky, he administers them in that order. If you're unlucky, he mixes them all together and calls it a miracle cure. The pain fades. So does your memory of the last 2 days. Welcome to the front lines of medieval medicine, where battlefields are muddy, the air smells of sweat and despair, and you're one bad decision away from discovering just how creative a surgeon can get with whatever's in his bag. You're lying on a makeshift stretcher, possibly just a door someone borrowed from a ruined hut, staring up at the sky and pondering if hospital corners are named for the graveyard on the hill. The battlefield surgeon arrives, more out of breath than you'd like, his hands stained with everything but actual hygiene. He's equal parts doctor, blacksmith, and very stressed bartender. His medical kit is a wild assortment: a saw, a rusty pair of forceps, 3 bandages, a good luck charm, and a collection of bottles with faded labels. There's poppy syrup for pain, cannabis poultices for swelling, and the famous flask of liquid courage, usually a potent ale or something he distilled last night behind the latrine. Your treatment depends entirely on his mood, your injury, and whether or not he's misplaced his spectacles. If you're lucky, you get a careful dab of poppy syrup, just enough to dull the agony and send you into a gentle, dreamlike state. For the bruised and battered, there's a poultice made from mashed cannabis leaves and whatever herbs haven't been trampled underfoot. If he's really feeling ambitious, you get both at once, wrapped up in a bandage that smells strongly of hope and faintly last night's stew. Then comes the liquid courage. It's administered with the kind of gravity reserved for holy relics. A generous swig before surgery, another for the surgeon himself, and a third just in case. If you object, the surgeon shrugs and says, "It's this or nothing, lad." Medieval battlefield consent is mostly a matter of not biting anyone's fingers. Of course, the methods aren't foolproof. The poppy syrup can erase the pain, and most of your memories from the last 48 hours. You might wake up swaddled in rags, your legs suspiciously lighter, and with a story about how you bravely fought off 24 nights that nobody quite believes. The cannabis poultice soothes burns, dulls aches, and occasionally inspires philosophical discussions with the guy next to you about whether turnips have feelings. Side effects are plentiful: slurred speech, impromptu singing, and a temporary belief that you are, in fact, invincible. The lucky ones get a nap, some relief, and a ride home with at least one limb still attached. The less fortunate get a lecture about how the body heals best with good cheer and strong ale, delivered by a surgeon who is, by this point, definitely not sober. When things go well, you hobble away with a new scar and a wild tale for the next feast. When things don't, you get a mass, a memorial, and your name added to the long list of brave but unlucky souls. Either way, the field surgeon adds another notch to his belt and another recipe to his growing collection of miracle cures. If anyone asks, he'll claim success 90% of the time. Just don't ask about the other 10. In the end, you realize that battlefield medicine is a blend of luck, courage, and whatever herbal concoction the surgeon hasn't finished himself. If you wake up, celebrate. If not, well, at least you won't remember the pain or the taste of the miracle cure. And that, in the world of medieval warfare, is about as good as medicine gets. Your head is pounding, your vision's blurry, and a chicken is staring at you with concern. Fortunately, the village wise woman has a remedy: a hearty cup of the very same wine, spiked with yesterday's leftover poppy syrup and a sprig of rosemary. It's the original hair of the dog, except the dog is actually chewing on your shoe. You've survived another medieval night of revelry, or at least, you think you did. The evidence is everywhere: a wine stain shaped suspiciously like the Virgin Mary, half a loaf of bread in your pocket, and a vague memory of singing ballads to the mayor's pig. You try to sit up, but the world spins and your mouth feels like you've been chewing on a dusty thatch roof. Enter the wise woman, her arms full of bottles, her eyes full of sympathy, and her remedies as old as the hills. She doesn't bother with questions. Instead, she shoves a cup into your hands and warns, "Drink up, but don't ask what's in it." The concoction smells of last night's regrets: sour wine, a dash of poppy syrup for the pain, and a generous sprig of rosemary to convince you that it's medicinal. The taste is somewhere between herbal encouragement and please don't throw up on my shoes, but desperate times call for desperate measures. You down it in one go. In the Middle Ages, hangover cures are all about survival. The village recipe is simple. If the thing that caused the misery is still available, have more of it, preferably before the sun reaches your window. Wine for wine, ale for ale, and if the hangover was caused by a mysterious festival punch, hope there's still some left in the communal cauldron. The logic is flawless. Why suffer when you can just delay the suffering until tomorrow? But this isn't just about wine. The wise woman believes in balancing the humours, which means she'll add whatever's handy, honey if you're lucky, turnip juice if you're not, a sprinkle of poppy to take the edge off, and the ever-present hint of something she calls herbal joy. It's definitely just time. As she bustles around, she mutters incantations, sprinkles a bit of salt over your head, and recommends that you walk backward around the house 3 times, for luck. You try, trip over the dog, and end up back where you started, headache intact, dignity further reduced. The village has its own traditions for hangover recovery. Some swear by greasy bacon, fried over an open fire and served with a chunk of stale bread. Others recommend dunking your head in the horse trough, refreshes the spirits and keeps the lice confused. The blacksmith claims the only cure is sweat it out, usually while shoeing horses, which explains why he's always so cranky the morning after a feast. There's also communal suffering. Hangovers are a group activity. The church is full of groaning parishioners, the baker's queue is unusually slow, and the children tiptoe through the village, terrified of waking the adults. The priest, ever practical, adds an extra 10 minutes to morning prayers for those who need forgiveness and hydration. By midday, your headache has dulled, your stomach has settled, and the world is only spinning a little. The wise woman drops by one last time, bearing a cup of weak ale and a reassuring pat on the shoulder. She winks and says, "Remember, moderation next time." You nod, knowing full well that by the next feast, you'll have forgotten every promise and be right back where you started, except, hopefully, with your shoes still on your feet. In the medieval world, hangover cures aren't about science. They're about community, tradition, and the unshakable belief that if you just keep drinking, eventually the pain will give up and go away. It never does. But that's beside the point. As you drift back to sleep, the chickens still watching over you, you're reminded that survival isn't just about getting through the night. It's about finding the courage to face tomorrow's headache with a cup of yesterday's wine and a smile. So tonight, as you drift off in your clean sheets, far from the drafty halls of medieval inns and the questionable charms of herbal medicine, maybe take a moment to marvel at how far we've come. Your mattress doesn't contain straw, your headache isn't treated with opium mixed into wine by a sleep-deprived monk, and the only poppy seeds you have to worry about are stuck in your teeth from breakfast. That's progress. Think about the resilience of people back then, living day by day through feasts, famines, plagues, and parties, all while chasing the next big miracle cure, or just a decent night's sleep. They made it through cold winters, rough mornings, and the kind of hangovers that would end most modern friendships. They tried every remedy and herb, hoping to find peace, relief, or at least a really good story to tell at the next village festival. Maybe it's a little funny, but it's also a testament to how stubborn, creative, and, let's face it, delightfully reckless people have always been. History is full of big risks, small comforts, and the kind of just try it and see what happens, energy that gets you either a breakthrough or, occasionally, a visit from the local priest with some holy water. So as you settle into the quiet and let the day slip away, remember that you are the descendant of survivors, people who made it through bad wine, worse medicine, and the world's original group hangover. Be grateful for your fan, your pillow, your pharmacy, and the fact that no one is about to slip henbane into your midnight snack. Thanks for spending your evening here. Like, subscribe, and drop a comment if you made it all the way to the end. Just don't tell me what herbs you're sipping tonight. Sleep well, dream easy, and may your only midnight visions be the soothing, mildly absurd kind. Good night.